Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Impractical Privacy. This is your weekly dose of truth about your digital life. I'm Sudo, the host of the show. Whether you're joining us from last week or new here, welcome. If you are new here, each week we will cut through the tech jargon and deliver the real privacy news you need to know, from data breaches and surveillance trends to simple, actionable tactics you can use today to protect your information. If you're in the United States, tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so happy early Thanksgiving. If you're outside the U.S., eat well tomorrow, knowing most in the U.S. are as well. All right, let's jump right in. Last week, we ended up in the weeds a bit around DNS, what it is, and several different methods of blocking and managing DNS queries. So if you aren't familiar with DNS, you might want to give that episode a listen, or at least the last few minutes of it. As part of this discussion, we touched on the privacy concerns dealing with ads, trackers, and data brokers, and how DNS can help with those concerns. Let's start by doing a much deeper dive into those and what you can do to help protect your data. Ads are everywhere. When you go to a restaurant, your menu might have ads. You drive down any interstate in the U.S. and you're bound to see billboards. Even non-interstate roads in major towns and cities, and I guarantee you'll see ads. Everything from products to services to injury attorneys to anti-drug campaigns. Ads are ever prevalent in our day-to-day lives. So much so that a lot of people don't look at the ads on their computers and phones as anything more than just an advertisement, something that's just in the way of the content they really want to see. Paid for by the business selling the product, probably placed there by a mega corporation who sold the ad. And at a surface level, that's exactly true. However, peel back the surface and you'll discover that there's a lot more that goes into building the profile to serve you the ad you just saw. Companies like Google and Meta, formerly known as Facebook, are at their core advertising services. That's where they get their main source of revenue. Both of these examples do have other products and services that they sell as well, such as hardware and subscriptions. But the lion's share of their money comes from selling ads. As my dad always says, if you aren't paying for the service, you are the product. And as much as it sometimes pains me to say, Dad was right all along. Google doesn't give you 15 gigabytes of free Gmail and Drive storage out of the kindness of their hearts. They want you to use the service so they can scan your emails and documents and build a profile of you based on that. Facebook is free, not because they want the world to be a more connected place, but because every time you use the service, they get to build a more accurate profile of you and serve you more relevant ads, which increases their ads value to their actual customers. And it's not just when you use Facebook either. Have you heard of the Meta Pixel, formerly Facebook Pixel? If not, no worries, I got you. This description is taken directly from Meta's website. Quote, "The Meta Pixel is a piece of code on your website that can help you better understand the effectiveness of your advertising and the actions people take on your site, like visiting a page or adding an item into their cart. You'll also be able to see when customers took an action after seeing your ad on Facebook and Instagram, which can help you with retargeting. When you use the Conversions API alongside the Pixel, it creates a more reliable connection that helps the delivery system decrease your costs." Basically, they're going to track you all over the place. Anyone paying for ads with Meta would be wise to include the Meta Pixel in their site. Why wouldn't they? Free analytics from Meta. But when you consider how much of the internet is including this code or similar code from another ad company, it becomes clear that we are all being tracked from the moment we visit the first site of the day to the minute you close the browser. And even after that, we'll get deeper into smart home devices and concerns around them in next week's episode. You don't have a Facebook account though, so you're in the clear? Yeah, that's not the case either. Facebook has admitted on record that they employ a tactic that they call shadow profiles. These allow them to track every single one of us all over the web. even those of us who don't have a Facebook profile. Curious what Meta is collecting on you? Don't worry, you can submit a request for the data. But wait, you have to know exactly what you're asking for, otherwise they don't fulfill the request. Quote, we ask you to specify what you want before we provide any information. What? Hard to know what to ask for when you don't even know what they have. Okay, so we've got Google and Meta tracking us all over the internet and feeding that data to their paying customers for them to see ad analytics. However, they aren't just not using that data for themselves too. This is how they get really deep into profile building and using all that additional data that they collect from all over the web to serve super targeted ads. Let's say you go to Google and you search for a dining room table. You click on a few links for tables that you think look nice, and then you move on without making a purchase. Google now knows you're looking for a new dining room set and will undoubtedly add that to the profile. Google owns YouTube, remember? Next, let's say you go to YouTube and you look up how to refinish the dining room set you already own to save money. And let's say your bank statements get emailed to you in your Gmail, and they show a smaller than you'd like balance for your checking account. Google now knows you're on a budget, looking for dining room sets, but probably going to refinish yours. This is how the profiles get built. But imagine all day, every day you're on the internet. All that to serve you hyper-targeted ads. And it's not just Google or Meta. There are entire companies out there that their entire business model is to collect and scrape as much data from existing sources as possible. Data brokers will scrape data from anywhere they can. Have a LinkedIn or Facebook that isn't set to fully private? They'll collect the data from it. Signed up for a free trial of something and clicked agree in the terms and conditions? Well, maybe that agreement says that they can share data with their partners, and maybe a data broker is one of their partners. In addition to all publicly available information, they'll also buy data from trackers placed in ads. Data like location, device type and orientation, movement, time spent on the page, and so much more. Data brokers will compile all of this into a nice package that potential buyers can then come through and purchase at their leisure. Potential buyers include individuals and businesses doing background checks, other data brokers or advertising agencies, even law enforcement. And for me, that's the real issue. All the way from local police here in the US up to the three-letter agencies have been known to buy data from these brokers in order to get around certain laws protecting citizens. Just in June of this year, EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, reported that the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is pushing to ease what restrictions we do have on three-letter agencies buying data broker data. Agencies like the NSA, CIA, and FBI. This is already a hotly debated area, and I suspect it will only continue to get worse. Additionally, as people put more and more of their data into the wild, the value of these data brokers will just continue to go up. If you think the data collection stops there, it doesn't. There's even a part of Equifax. Yes, the credit bureau Equifax, called the Work Number. What the Work Number does is entirely for businesses looking to hire people. The Work Number gives out your data to prospective employers. Data like employment dates, business income, and even your past income. This could be problematic. Let's say you're in a salary negotiation with a new employer. If they know you only make $55,000 a year at your current job, but you're asking for $75,000 based on experience, they can lowball you from your asking price while still paying you a little bit more than your current job. How does the Work Number gather this information? I literally cannot explain it better than they do. So here's what they say. Quote, companies sign up for the Work Number because it gives them an easy way to outsource employment verification of former workers. Firms hate taking these calls, which usually come when a former employee is applying for a new job, because they are a costly distraction for human resources departments and open up the firm to lawsuits if someone says something disparaging about the former employee. So they contract with the Work Number, which automates the process. In exchange, firms upload their human resources data to the Work Number. Yeah, you heard that right. This is literally a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours situation. Give me your information and you can have mine. People like me and you don't get to peek behind the curtain into a business and know exactly why the role is vacant and what they paid the last person who did that job and what the details of that situation is. So why do they get access to that information about you? And it's not just Equifax. One of the biggest data brokers in the US is LexisNexis. They collect all types of stuff on you, all for sale to whomever wants to pay. Information like judgments and liens, Secretary of State filings, Uniform Commercial Code filings, US and Canadian business finder directories, global market identifiers, Experian business reports, fictitious business name information such as doing business as, federal employee identification numbers, the franchise index, inactive business index, tax liens, Security and Exchange Commission forms, FAA aircraft registrations, even driver's license information, and credit header information. If you aren't familiar with credit header information, don't worry, I got you. Credit header data is the non-financial identifying information at the top of a credit report, including a person's name, current and previous addresses, phone number, and social security number. So yeah, LexisNexis has a ton of information on all of us. You can opt out from these guys as well as the work number. Link in the show notes for all that. Keep in mind, being harder to find online and in databases may make applying for credit or getting a new job a little different of a process. What about other data brokers? There's so many out there, and requests are not often one and done. They need to be recurring. There are many options for data removal services. I personally use Incogni. I've had a decent experience with them so far. They aren't perfect though. Their most affordable plan doesn't allow requests. Your info gets removed from whatever services they already include, and that's it. And it's not exactly cheap. Prices with them range between $16 and $46 if you pay monthly, depending upon what you get and how many people are covered. Annual plans are a bit cheaper. Check them out. I've also heard decent things about Delete Me, though they don't offer monthly plans, so keep that in mind as well. Also, if you possess a level of tenacity and patience that I do not have, you can manually submit all these requests yourself to the individual brokers on the free. But keep in mind that can be time consuming and will require some upkeep. Okay, so maybe now you're considering blocking ads and trackers at a DNS level on your devices. What else can you do to prevent yourself from being tracked online? We're about to talk about browser fingerprinting. If you aren't familiar with browser fingerprinting, don't worry, I got you. Browser fingerprinting is a tracking method that websites use to collect unique information about your device and browser to create a digital fingerprint. This is done by combining data like your browser version, screen resolution, installed fonts, time zone, and so much more, creating a unique identifier that can be used for tracking across different browsing sessions, even without cookies. It can even pull data from your device, like battery level, which can help companies do things like surveillance pricing. But we'll cover surveillance pricing in next week's episode. There are two main ways you can try to prevent from having a totally unique browser fingerprint. Option A is attempting to keep it as default as possible. Chrome and Safari are super common web browsers on mobile and Chrome on the desktop. So using one of those as your browser will help you to blend in. Keep your screen resolution to something standard, no extensions. Just keep it as default as possible. With this method, you will still be tracked as you move across different sites, but it's harder to stand out when you look like everyone else. Kind of like a Where's Waldo approach to browser fingerprinting. You're there, but not standing out is a benefit. Option B is to go the other direction. Use a browser and extensions that actively fight fingerprinting. When it comes to browsers, there are as many options as there are opinions on the matter. It's my belief that most of them do something right, and it's about finding the right mix of usability, features, and privacy. You can't really get all three perfectly, you get to pick two. And it depends on your platform. Let's start with mobile. If you're on iOS, you have Safari as your default to blend in, and several options on the other end of the spectrum. There's Brave, DuckDuckGo, Firefox Focus, and Orion. They each have their own benefits and drawbacks, but those are the main ones in my experience. When I was using an iPhone, Orion was my go-to. It's got an ad blocker built in and focuses on reducing the amount of telemetry able to be sourced from your browser. As of this recording, it still doesn't appear to be open source though, so for my FOSS fans, that might be problematic. On Android, you have Chrome as your default. And to go the other direction, your main options are Brave, DuckDuckGo, Firefox Focus, and a ton of other Firefox flavors like Iron Fox, Water Fox, Ice Raven, and the list goes on. Which is the best one? Personally, I use Graphene OS on my phone instead of regular Android, so that unlocks a different option for me. I use Vanadium, which is a hardened version of Chromium as my daily driver on my phone. For those of you who have never heard of Graphene OS, don't worry, I got you. Graphene is a security-hardened version of Android that's only available for Google Pixel phones. Graphene can be used pretty much exactly as a regular Android phone, so much that if I happen to hand my phone to someone so they can look at something, they'd be incredibly hard-pressed to tell that it wasn't running regular Android. But we'll do a deep dive into mobile OSs and hardware in a future episode. If you're using Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, your blend-in browser should probably be Chrome again. It's just that it's the most commonly used browser in the world, not that it's incredible and better than the rest. Default go-to for fingerprint-resistant browsing on the desktop is LibreWolf. This is a Firefox fork that focuses on removing all the telemetry bits as well as limiting fingerprinting through some clever tactics. LibreWolf can block cross-site cookies as well as clearing all cookies on exit, has a letterbox feature to obscure your actual display resolution, and so much more. As far as browsability with LibreWolf, it is entirely dependent on how restrictive you have your settings to, so keep that in mind. If you're using Linux, your situation does get a bit harder to avoid the fingerprint. Linux is still not a terribly widespread desktop operating system, so it's harder to blend in. Your best course of action, in my opinion, is to go towards actively fighting fingerprinting with a browser like LibreWolf. Again, I feel like I need to go on record and say some of the privacy-preserving tactics discussed across this podcast will make your daily internet activities harder to achieve. Not necessarily an awful thing, but something you need to be aware of. Sometimes it just requires a change in mindset, though. When something doesn't work because I'm using a VPN or because of a blocked tracker or ad, my response is, all right, now I know they want my data more than they want my business. And I'll be honest, it used to really bother me when this would happen. I'd get irritated and sometimes switch browsers or turn off my VPN or switch back to my default DNS resolver. As I've gone through this journey, I've learned that, for me, that's rarely the correct answer. Really leaning into the idea that whatever business I'm trying to give my money to or attention to would rather have my data or serve me an ad has led me to find alternatives when that happens. Sometimes that's finding a different retailer, sometimes it's just not buying it online and trying to find it locally. And yet, even with all of this, sometimes your worst digital privacy violation is you, but it's not always your fault. Some businesses are now using tactics known as dark patterns or deceptive patterns. This is a user interface design tactic that encourages users to buy overpriced items or sign up for recurring bills, or in the context of what we're talking about, privacy zuckering. Yes, it's really named that, and aptly named after Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg. Privacy zuckering is a practice that tricks users into sharing more information than they intended to. Users may give up this information unknowingly or through practices that obscure or delay the option to opt out of sharing their private information. A lot of the privacy concerns revolves around opt-out features and has become prevalent online when dealing with companies training their AI models on your data. If you aren't familiar with how AI models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, and many, many more are trained, don't worry, I got you. To train an AI model, the company needs to feed it an obscene amount of data. Realistically, they require many more times the data than an average person will generate in their lifetime. Well, creating this vast amount of data is hard. Buying it is expensive. Some companies have stolen terabytes of data off the internet to feed their AI. But the easiest way is to feed it the data you already have if you have enough data. And companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Twitter, occasionally known as X, all have a war chest of data on their servers. And chances are, when you signed up to these services, you basically agreed that anything you post to them is the property of that company. And they can use it how they want to, as long as they don't use it in a copyright type situation. As recent as last week, there's been some controversy around this with Gmail and Google's Gemini. Due to a feature update in Gmail, several reporters were under the impression that Google was using Gmail data to help train its AI models. Google has denied this and stated that what they actually did was roll out additional AI features in Gmail. Again, this is an opt-out type situation where you're enrolled by default. Google claims they aren't training AI on your data, though, simply using it to provide things like smart replies and spam detection. Now, I do believe Google in this situation. They probably aren't using it to train their AI. That would be a disaster, I think. But allowing Google AI deep access into my emails where it will scan and profile still doesn't sit well with me. Additionally, if you do opt out of all the AI features in Gmail, you lose other features you've had for ages, like spell check. A business that wants to remove available features and tie them to privacy invasive new ones that I might not want doesn't seem to want my business. Again, they value my data more. However, there are several privacy by default email providers that are highly recommended. ProtonMail is the one I use and pay for. ProtonMail is based in Switzerland, which, for now, has significantly stronger data protection laws than the US, although there is some stuff going on in their levels of government that might change that in the future. But with ProtonMail, your inbox is fully encrypted by default, as well as any emails you send to another Proton user. Sending emails externally does require you to set up PGP. We'll go over PGP in a future episode, though. Proton does have a free tier for almost all of their services, and in my experience, is probably one of the only companies where the rule about not paying means you are the product does not apply. They even explain that in their blog. Paying users like me help subsidize the service for people who either can't afford to pay or don't know if the service will work for them and is the right decision. I highly recommend Proton and all their products. Another I've heard high praise of, but have never used personally, is TutorMail. Links for both of these providers are in the show notes of this episode. And on that note, that wraps up this week's episode. As I said previously, content like this really thrives based on community interaction and feedback. I'm new to this, so as of this recording, the main ways to chat about anything are either through the chat and Patreon or emailing me directly. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share it with your family and friends. If you'd like to support me in this journey, I do have a Patreon, and as of this episode, a newsletter. Links to my Patreon, newsletter, email address, and all the news articles and quotes mentioned in the show are in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Impractical Privacy, and tune in next Wednesday for an in-depth dive into the AI-powered ever-listening devices in our homes, surveillance pricing, as well as more current privacy news and trends. One last thing before you go. Why did the security expert break up with the network engineer? She said he kept logging all her feelings.